the dawn of civilization, an alien force descended on planet Earth, and nothing would ever be the same.
And they created human beings to be slaves and servants of the gods.
Millions believe we are the creation of extraterrestrials.
The genetic engineering of the human race was a profound event in the history of the world.
They say our ancestors reveal the truth in the mysterious clues they left behind.
When these ancient texts speak of these strange beings that have descended from the sky, we should look at it as such, that, hey, we were visited by ETs.
Did aliens mate with primitive humans, jumping our evolution ahead by thousands of years? One man says he's got proof.
I believe that the Star Child is not entirely human.
Others aren't so sure.
Until they come up with some positive evidence supporting that, scientists are just going to ignore it.
Skeptics and believers look at the theory of ancient astronauts from every angle to see if it's real or just out of this world. Thousands of years ago, humans huddled around their simple fires, living their simple lives. They didn't have much, including ideas about the wide world outside their caves. But one day, as the story goes, the universe changed for good. Because on that day, thousands of years ago, extraterrestrials, aliens, arrived on Earth to make contact with us. What's that? Alien astronauts from another planet? Sounds crazy, but if you believe it, you're not alone. Millions around the world believe exactly that. Thanks to the efforts of legendary author Eric von Däniken and his bestseller, Chariots of the Gods.
It was an absolute mind-provoking book. It brought up a worldwide discussion. So it was really something which came up with a brand new idea.
Von Däniken saw something almost unexplainable in our ancient historical record. He said the aliens came to Earth, but he couldn't say why. Since his book came out in 1968, the theories developed a reason for the alien visits. It goes like this. Long ago and far away, a planet much like ours experienced its own global warming problem. The only thing to protect the planet's eroding atmosphere from the scorching rays of the sun? Gold. But they needed a lot of gold. So beings from that faraway planet searched the universe for an alternate source. Somehow, the extraterrestrials found us, and a planet fairly oozing with gold. So they set up shop right here, making us virtual slaves to mine our earthly gold for them. While they were here, they built major monuments, like pyramids around the world, from Egypt to the Americas. They used those monuments to navigate the stars and as landing pads for their spaceships. Maybe they looked like us, maybe they looked a little freakier. Whatever they looked like, supposedly the visitors taught us a lot about new technologies. Giorgio Tsoukalos is a protege of Eric von Däniken. Today, he's bringing the ancient astronauts theory to a new generation.
Technologically speaking, we were still primitive, and they just gave us a push, a gentle push in the right direction. As in, you know, they taught us in mathematics, they taught us in astronomy, in agriculture, and so on and so forth. You know, just essentially to guide us in the right direction.
But of course, the most important alien technology was mining technology. To get that all-important gold. Where's the evidence of all this, you may ask? It seems the proof is all around us.
If you look in the right places, you have archaeological sites, you have textual evidence. When the natives asked these beings, where did you come from? They never point across the ocean, they always point to the sky.
Not everyone agrees. Veteran archaeologist Ken Fader thinks the backers of the ancient astronauts theory see only what they want to see.
For them, it's like an extraterrestrial Peace Corps. They know these people from outer space land on Earth, they look around after mating with us for a while, they go, these poor dummies, we need to help them out.
Nevertheless, believers see proof of their ideas in artifacts and monuments from antiquity.
So my theory is that this pyramid was a machine.
One place we can look for evidence is right here in North America, near Mexico City. Ancient astronaut theorist Ted Strain believes a mysterious ancient city called Teotihuacan is actually a place where extraterrestrials once mined and processed the gold.
The theory being that something having to do with pyramid energy, cosmic radiation, solar wind, who knows, in combination with the shape of the pyramid, channeled that energy and reacted with a certain way with the mica, causing like a chemical reaction to occur that helped the gold settle out of solution.
No archaeologist knows for sure who built Teotihuacan. But one thing we do know is that when the Aztecs found the city around the 14th century, it was already a ruin. Very odd. To Ted, it's all proof the ancient astronauts used this place as a one-stop center, employment agency, astral observatory, and shopping mall all in one. But Teotihuacan isn't the only place aliens landed when they supposedly colonized us. All around the world, strange and mysterious structures seem designed for beings and crafts from another world. Not far from Teotihuacan is Chichen Itza, with a built-in landing pad on top of its main pyramid, and Baalbek in northern Lebanon, an ancient ruin of a massive stone something. But perhaps the most mysterious landing site of all, the Nazca Lines in Peru. The Nazca Lines have stymied mysticists and archaeologists alike for decades. Crisscrossing a high desert plateau, the lines have been around for at least 1,000 years. Thing is, some say they really look like modern-day landing strips.
Some of these pictographs are a mile or two long in a perfectly straight line. Something that even today we'd have trouble duplicating without transits and all sorts of technical equipment. So how did the peoples from 3,000 years ago in Peru, how did they do this? There's no explanation.
But more than just landing strips, there's something even more amazing if you see them from above. Monkeys and spiders and birds bigger than whole football fields. Invisible on the ground, brought to life from the air. How could any ancient civilization have done this without the help of mechanical lifts, airplanes, or even spaceships?
They could have had somebody up in a balloon or up in an airplane or up in a spacecraft or an anti-gravity craft directing them on where to draw the lines.
An even bigger question is, why would the extraterrestrials want to build landing strips and strange animal shapes at Nazca? Why would they choose any place in particular? We don't really know. But one thing many say we do know is that once they landed, the astronauts got busy.
Don't get out of visual. Keep on the roll.
According to the stories, they took us under their wings and showed us how to make and use tools. Like lasers to cut stones into neat slabs and blocks. Blocks could be made into the monuments from antiquity that still amaze us, like the Egyptian pyramids. Archaeologists believe the pyramids are 5,000 years old. Each block of stone weighs up to 15 tons. how did ordinary people build these miracles of architecture on their own? On the other side of the world, the ancient megaliths of Easter Island, each statue up to 82 tons. And in South America, blocks on giant stone gates, pyramids, and megaliths standing watch at 13,000 feet. Hundreds, some say thousands of years old, weighing up to 130 tons each. The kind of technology average humans would need to move these things, carve them, and illuminate them may seem too high-tech for our ancient forefathers. But a hieroglyph deep in an Egyptian temple may give an astounding clue we simply can't ignore. But first, all this may tell us something about how the aliens could have affected us once they arrived on our planet. But you gotta wonder, how was their family life?
Boys, I think we
Did they ever return to a faraway star, or did they stick around?
There's going to be a large headline when they see all these great things we're bringing back to them.
And are their descendants living among us? Seems far-fetched, but consider this. In the 1930s, a teenage girl was exploring in a cave in Mexico when she came across something remarkable. 2 skeletons, half buried in the dirt. When she dug them up, she was amazed at one of their skulls. It was deformed with a huge cranium and strange, shallow eye sockets. Not your average human skull. Could this skull be physical evidence that aliens not only colonized our planet, but changed the course of our human species forever? Author Lloyd Pye thinks so.
I believe that the Star Child is not entirely human.
Let's say I do believe it. Where are we right now?
Before we can learn if any skull proves the ancient astronauts' theory, we need to go way back to the very beginning.
It'll take days to analyze and compute.
The earliest evidence of a human search for something outside ourselves. We may find the truth in ancient cave drawings. When archaeologists began studying the stories our ancestors left carved in stones and caves, some people noticed images and artifacts that just didn't seem to fit with what we'd always assumed our history to be. Many were hard-pressed to explain images like these of what appear to be men in spacesuits with helmets and antennae. Since the dawn of the field of archaeology, the accepted explanation has been that these images depict gods, nothing more.
When I see an artifact, then it looks like there's a god and there's somebody floating up in the air, and I go, well, that matches what we know about their origin story. I'm guessing that they're depicting a god. I think that's a simpler explanation than somebody else saying, no, it could be an extraterrestrial who happens to have a levitation device.
In the early 20th century, modern-day levitation devices got us thinking about those mysterious Nazca Lines in Peru and wondering who could have made these amazing geoglyphs without direction from something, or someone, above. Others theorize that maybe we built them on our own after all, when the aliens left us to return to their astral home. That's what Ted Strain thinks.
The gods left, and the peoples that were left over that had contact with the gods wanted them to come back. So they drew pictures on the ground saying, here we are. If you're going to come back, here we are, land here.
Could aliens have been the facilitators of our greatest artistic and cultural steps forward? For a long time, it seemed too far-fetched to contemplate. But in the 1960s, when man first hurtled through space and set foot on the moon, suddenly, the thought of beings from another planet making a reverse commute didn't seem like such a crazy notion. Soon, the ancient astronauts theory was ready for its close-up. It got exactly that when author Eric von Daniken published his earth-shaking book, Chariots of the Gods, in 1968.
I was the manager of a hotel when I wrote Chariots of the Gods. And it was a book with quite some mistakes, quite some things which I know today were wrong. Not everything, but part of it.
Right or wrong, for the first time, the idea that aliens visited Earth thousands of years ago and forever changed human history spread like wildfire. But von Däniken wasn't the first to put the idea out there. For decades, believers in a controversial idea dubbed the diffusion theory wagered a guess on the origins of human intelligence.
Where we find tremendous advances, it's most likely that there was a single source for that. Because generally speaking, people are dumb. You got to find one genius culture. The diffusionists initially pointed to Egypt. The Atlantis popularizers pointed to the middle of the Atlantic and said, no, it came from there. Eric von Däniken points up.
A handful of surviving humans.
By the mid-70s, the ancient astronauts theory came into its own.
They must fight their way across the universe, searching for a legendary planet.
Enemy approaching, 100 microns.
Known as Earth.
Enemy closing.
Over the decades, alien contact became routine fodder for books, TV, and the silver screen.
Did it happen eons ago, or will it happen tomorrow?
Throughout all this excitement, one question seemed to really resonate among believers. Who built the Great Pyramids of Egypt? More than anywhere else, the pyramids represent almost unimaginable feats of architecture in the ancient world. Author William Henry believes the evidence they were built by someone other than the Egyptians is overwhelming.
When I look at the pyramid, I think an advanced extraterrestrial race had to have been involved in the construction of it.
There's also all those underground pyramid chambers. Many concluded they protected the Egyptian priests during the coming and going of the gods, that is, the aliens.
I think the Great Pyramid is a giant energy device. It's capable of receiving and transmitting energy from distant points around the cosmos. The key to that is the location of the Great Pyramid. It's located at the exact center of the land masses of the Earth.
The icing on the cake is the Great Pyramid's seeming alignment with the sun and stars. And their geographic orientation seems to be in line with the position of stars within the Orion constellation. How did a 5,000-year-old civilization make all these advanced calculations? And why? Videographer Ted Strain sees a similar mystery in the pyramid complex of Teotihuacan.
The builders of the site, the planners of this site, A, either had knowledge from the heavens, or B, they were created by the gods themselves. The planners of this site may have been the gods. In fact, Teotihuacan, the name of the site, means place of the gods, or place that the gods gathered.
Some say this ancient city was built in exactly the same arrangement as our solar system, and even includes a small pyramid to represent Pluto. Thing is, although Teotihuacan is 2,000 years old, Pluto was discovered just a few decades ago. How could this be?
The answer is that there may have been extraterrestrial gods that had come down from the heavens and had imparted their knowledge on humanity, their knowledge of mathematics and astronomy.
Ted thinks a royal group of aliens called the Anunnaki built Teotihuacan and many mysterious structures like it. Who are these Anunnaki, and what planet did they come from? 6,000 years ago, the world's oldest known civilization, the Sumerians of Mesopotamia, carved tablets that tell stories of how deities called the Anunnaki descended to Earth from a place they called Nibiru. They gifted us with new technologies and shared their wisdom about our place in the solar system. Think about that. One of the first known human civilizations, 6,000 years ago, scooping us on the alignment of the planets. Most scholars call the Anunnaki gods and take the Sumerians' writings as myths, but not everyone.
When these ancient texts speak of these strange beings that have descended from the sky, we should look at it as such and not add symbolism to it or interpretation. Well, they could have meant this or they could have meant that, when it could be very, very simple. That, hey, we were visited by ETs.
Not only did ETs visit us, according to the ancient astronauts' theory, the extraterrestrials actually created us in ways almost too shocking to believe. But is there proof? This ancient skull could be the evidence we need that hundreds or thousands of years ago, aliens came to Earth and mated with humans.
They saw those among the humans that they thought were fair and took them as wives.
The mystery of how we arrived on Earth is a big part of the ancient astronauts' theory. Mainstream scientists agree that modern humans evolved from an ancestor we share with other primates. But Homo sapiens has walked the Earth for over 100,000 years, and experts have long wondered what sparked the sudden rise of civilization a mere 6,000 years ago.
This missing link was an extraterrestrial intervention in our genes. Because one thing is extremely clear. A quantum leap happened from us being in the caves, and then all of a sudden, we're building pyramids.
Ancient astronaut backers claim the spark for human civilization came from deep space, when aliens swooped down, knocked up our women, and took off.
I've called that the horny astronaut hypothesis, that astronauts land on Earth. What's the first thing they do is they go out looking for females to breed with to produce the next step in evolution. And what? Earth gets the reputation of being a party planet, and they keep coming back and breeding with their offspring and producing the next generation of us. And finally, there's us, and we're the product of this breeding experiment.
It's an age-old story of love 'em and leave 'em.
There was interbreeding going on. It talks about it in the Bible, how the sons of God had come down and found that the daughters of man were very attractive, and they cohabitated with them and produced offspring.
Well, maybe they didn't just leave us. They stuck around a little while to enjoy the fruits of their labor.
They took mistresses or concubines or whatever you want to call them, but they also married a few. They fell in love.
Or did the story unfold a different way? Some ancient astronauts theorists now say the story of our creation wasn't quite so sexy. They say the way it happened was more like genetic manipulation. The earliest creation story involves Sumerian gods creating humans from tubes and jars and clay. But if you subscribe to the ancient astronauts theory, the gods doing this creating aren't actually gods. They're aliens. Whether they're mating with us or creating us out of clay, you gotta wonder, why?
The extraterrestrials did not dirty their hands. They had an obedient workforce here on Earth that worshipped them as gods.
Ah, they needed a workforce.
The ancient astronauts had come here for one reason: for mining. And not only did they have them working in the mines, but they were also raising animals, growing crops. They basically were a servant to the gods.
Servants or not, we may find a clue to when the aliens started working here in China, with an interesting people called the Dropa.
The Dropa allegedly is an extraterrestrial race that has still survived here on planet Earth.
As the story goes, in 1938, an archaeologist discovered a strange gravesite in a cave near the China-Tibet border. He found tiny skeletons with large skulls. He also found some strange stone discs with microscopic inscriptions embedded in grooves. Although bizarre, his discovery was overlooked for 20 years when someone claimed to translate the stone's inscriptions. Supposedly, they told a story of beings that crash-landed on our planet 12,000 years ago.
They were stranded. They developed a civilization, a village, and they continued to flourish and plant crops. And in the end, they became the ancestors of the Chinese race.
It's a claim fantastic enough to warrant further investigation. We may never know the truth. Many claim the Chinese are keeping the evidence under lock and key.
And ask yourself, why are there 1.2 billion Chinese on Earth? Because they were here first.
Incredible. But how?
There is one skull not unlike the one supposedly found in China that may tell a similar story. But we can actually examine this skull and find out what its history may be. A teenage girl found it in Mexico 70 years ago.
She went in and she saw a skeleton lying on its back. She was able to scrape the dirt away with her hands and reveal a skeleton lying in the hole, and which she said was misshapen.
Since that day, the skull's changed hands at least 2 times. Today, Ray and Melanie Young like to think of themselves as the skull's parents.
I had a friend that was working with me, and her husband had come into it from the lady who actually found it because of my background as a neonatal nurse, and he asked me to look at it. And first he showed me a picture, and the picture was just of this part of the face, and I looked at it and thought, I have no idea what that is.
They wanted to know once and for all what its story is, so they brought in alternative knowledge guru Lloyd Pye to check it out.
There was just no doubt in our mind that he was the person to take over.
The thing that most impressed me first about the star child relative to a human being is its eye sockets, because my father was an optometrist for more than 40 years, and I knew an awful lot about eye sockets and what they were supposed to look like. The first thing I did, I was on my way to a very big UFO Congress in Laughlin, Nevada. So I suggested that they allow me to take the 2 skulls to this conference that I was going to, where there were going to be 500 people, many of whom would be very highly knowledgeable about this kind of material, and see if they agreed.
What they found surprised everyone.
They were unanimous in their assertions that this skull looked very much like it would fit in the head of a gray.
A gray alien is the kind many say they've seen here on Earth.
So then I was fully committed to the idea of taking it to scientists.
One of the first things Lloyd did was check out exactly how old the skull is. He took it to a lab in Miami for radiocarbon dating and found out it's 900 years old. Then they looked at the skull's bone under a microscope. They were amazed to find a strange red residue and strange, strong fibers inside the bone.
So there are 2 great anomalies, but it is absolutely one of a kind as far as we know, and as far as anybody we took that material to, mycologists and others, know. Never been seen before.
Lloyd believes this skull is not totally from our world. He thinks this ancient skull is the offspring of a human and an extraterrestrial, and he's named it the Star Child.
That really was not the best choice of names for it. Try to talk to a scientist and you'd say, I want to talk to you about an unusual skull I have. They would want to know if it has a name or is it called anything, and I would have to say the Star Child, and right away, click.
The only way Lloyd can find out for sure if the Star Child is human or alien is to test its DNA. Lloyd's staking his reputation on it, and he's ready to find out the truth, for better or for worse. All this speculation about whether or not aliens created us and facilitated our major ancient accomplishments can be hard for mere mortals to understand. Let's see if hard science can build up the theory, or if it'll just tear it down.
We are down deep in the ground looking at these ancient levels, and if there was physical evidence of extraterrestrials, we'd be the ones to find them.
The evidence that extraterrestrials colonized us, interbred with us, and shared all their knowledge can seem overwhelming to some.
The high density of our planet made it possible for us to advance gravity and therefore anti-gravity theories. It's beyond me.
At many sites around the world, we can only marvel at how ancient people could cut and move stones weighing up to 100 tons each. And artifacts offer surprising clues of technology we never imagined the ancient world could have. Some archaeologists are amazed by ancient relics that have come to light in decades past. One of the most baffling could change how we write history, if it's real. We've always thought Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, right? Well, maybe not. Maybe the aliens did. Deep inside an ancient Egyptian temple, a strange wall carving lures visitors with its mysterious symbolism. Most Egyptologists believe it shows the birth of a god. Others say this hieroglyph depicts an ancient electric light bulb, complete with filament and electrical cord.
It is absolutely spectacular to see that, electricity was not invented by our civilization. It's been around for centuries. It's just been forgotten, lost knowledge.
Hard to believe, but you have to wonder, how did they carve all those other hieroglyphs and pictures inside a pitch-dark pyramid? Many believers rule out oil lamps or torches because not much telltale soot has been found inside the pyramids. So if they didn't use oil or torches, what's left? Batteries? Maybe. Not far from Egypt, in the 1930s, archaeologists found a remarkable device that proves the people who lived here 2,000 years ago actually made an electric battery. Today it's called the Baghdad Battery.
A lot of these things like electricity, those things were only privy to a select few.
How could people from the time of Jesus know how to make a battery?
I believe that a lot of these ancient technologies that we've been rediscovering do indeed come from extraterrestrials. I think what's happened is that the technology was possibly left here for us to use for a while, and then maybe after a while it started breaking down, and just like our car, we don't know how to fix it, and so it gets destroyed.
While ancient astronauts' backers see the Baghdad Battery as evidence of an alien hand, far away in Texas, ancient technology professor Nancy Reed sees something else.
The technology needed to make the Baghdad Battery is basically very simple. The hollow rod is copper, and the solid one is iron, and then of course we would have filled the container with vinegar.
Then just put it together, and the acidic vinegar sparks an electrical reaction.
And by touching the ends of, say, a voltmeter to this, we can create about a half a volt.
Half a volt isn't much electricity, and it's still a mystery why they had electrical batteries 2,000 years ago. But is it fair to credit aliens with this amazing technology? Or could something even more baffling be at work here? Could the Baghdad Battery, or something like it, have powered the Egyptian light bulb? We might find an answer to this question in Switzerland. Author Eric von Daniken recently built a theme park revolving around the ancient astronauts' theory, and it features an incredible exhibit based on the ancient Egyptian light bulb. Publicist Caroline Schneider finds the light bulb a remarkable idea.
This is what it looks like. So they must have had a way to have light within those pyramids. This is a possibility. If it's true, I do not know. But just thinking of it, it's quite amazing if they really had it.
At von Daniken's theme park, the light bulb is fueled by replicas of the Baghdad Battery. Never mind the battery's 3,000 years younger than the so-called light bulb. But is the original image actually a light bulb? Or is it just an idea born from someone's wild imagination?
When I read von Daniken's books now, I do the same thing I tell my students to. Cover up the caption, and I will guarantee you that if you do that, you don't see a light bulb. You see what looks to be an eggplant. You take your hand off, you go, it's a light bulb? Huh? What's he talking about? Tell you what. Find the glass, find where it's the metal, where you screw it into the socket, and find the source of energy for that light bulb, that's physical evidence.
It seems all that shines is not gold. But is there gold in the ruins of Teotihuacan? More than that, was this place built by extraterrestrials to actually process our gold? The truth leaves the gold theory bankrupt. Archaeologist Kim Goldsmith has spent the past 24 years studying the ruins of Teotihuacan.
There was no gold here. There is no gold anywhere in this area to start off with. There were no gold mines, and they were not bringing gold from anywhere during Teotihuacan times.
But there's still room for the idea this place was an alien landing pad, right?
Think about this. These guys, these extraterrestrials, are able to traverse interstellar space, and they need to eyeball where to land? Don't they have GPS or something?
So, no landing pad. Could these pyramids still have some kind of astral significance? Ted Strain thinks they were aligned to be an exact match of our solar system. But archaeologist Ken Fader says when it comes to the pyramids, pattern is in the eye of the beholder.
The layout of Teotihuacan, number one, has nothing to do with the planets. And number two, yeah, if you stop at 9, you get the right number of planets, because apparently the folks in Teotihuacan thought Pluto was a planet, but now some astronomers aren't so sure about that, so we'll have to figure that one out. But if you stop at 9, you get 9, you go, wow, there are 9 pyramids, just like the 9 planets. Well, that's because you stopped counting, because there's actually a 10th, and an 11th, and a 12th. But I don't know, maybe the ancient astronauts will think that that means that there used to be more planets in the solar system, because we end up with this perfectly circular argument.
The truth is, Teotihuacan was most likely a thriving city, no different from any other.
All you have to do is look around at any city and just about anywhere in the world today, and that's exactly the type of thing that went on. And the people who lived here were architects and engineers. There were people involved in the administrative and judicial system of the site, and there were also people involved in the army that defended the city.
There's also everyone's favorite ancient astronauts mystery, the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Some speculate the pyramids were built by everyone from Atlanteans to aliens, anyone but the Egyptians. But archaeologist Ken Fader says the writing is on the wall.
Well, that's sort of like saying we don't know how they built the Empire State Building. We have photographs of them building the Empire State Building, but we don't have photographs of building the pyramids. We have artwork produced by the Egyptians showing how they moved huge rocks. We have direct physical evidence on the rocks themselves of how they carved them.
We may never find proof of extraterrestrial stonemasons. But today, we have the chance to prove that hundreds of years ago, humans mated with aliens.
Being here on the border, working in the county hospital, I have seen every genetic disorder that's come through. So I've seen a lot of stuff, and this doesn't fit into any of that.
Among other things, we know it's about 900 years old, and that its eye sockets look out of this world. But the test that will best reveal whether or not the star child is at least partially alien can only be DNA testing. So Lloyd has put the skull through a battery of DNA tests. And what he found only deepens the mystery of the star child. Jason Eshelman of Trace Genetics in San Francisco has lots of experience working with ancient DNA. He worked on Kennewick Man, the 9,000-year-old human remains found in Washington state in 1996. Years later, Jason got another big challenge, the star child.
What drew me to it is that Lloyd was generally interested in addressing some of these questions with scientific tools where we could attempt to address some of these questions.
The process of extracting ancient DNA isn't much different than the process for modern DNA. It's just so much harder to find ancient DNA that's still intact.
Any biological material that's 900 years old, you'd expect the DNA to have gone through some degradation.
And there's no guarantee Jason can even see the star child's DNA if it's alien. And if aliens even have DNA. We'll find out the truth later. Now, Jason's got his work cut out for him. Another interesting puzzle is the question of the Nazca Lines in Peru. Some people believe there's no way humans alone could have made huge geoglyphs like these thousands of years ago without the ability to see their work from some kind of air or spacecraft. They say aliens made the Nazca Lines, or at least instructed us in how to make them. One expert says, no aliens required. Joe Nickel is a skeptic with the Committee for Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal.
Just so we say that's the upper margin.
He says it couldn't have been aliens who made the Nazca Lines for some simple reasons.
The ancient astronauts, of course, would have hovered overhead with a flying saucer. This would have created a great problem with dust. The Nazca helpers would, of course, have put dust masks on and squinted and bent down low. And then they would have used sticks and cord, like we're doing, to finish the figure.
First, he gets his materials ready.
This is un-Nazca-like, but is simply what we have to use since we don't have a gravel-littered desert.
Then, he's got to measure out the diagram of the figure. In this case, he'll attempt to recreate one of the most beautiful Nazca geoglyphs, the 150-foot spider.
They should be about 20 feet. See if this is about 20 feet from here to there. Huh? About 7. Let's just measure here again. This time spent on this particular configuration pays dividends. That's why I'm taking plenty of time with it.
But Joe seems to be having some trouble. He's a little short.
Okay. Then,
maybe a little extraterrestrial help wouldn't be such a bad idea. Joe Nichols got a lot to prove in his quest to explain the Nazca Lines. For decades, their mystery has been a cornerstone of the ancient astronauts' theory. Today, Joe thinks he can demystify the Nazca Lines for good.
People are often impressed with things like giant ground drawings or crop circles because they imagine that it's far more difficult than it is. But in fact, it's not hard to make a smooth circle. And what you can do on a small sheet of paper with a compass and a straight edge, you can make it huge.
All it takes is plotting out the points on a grid and measuring the points on a field with ordinary stakes and rope. So it's not so hard to do, but Joe's had practice making the Nazca Lines. He recreated one of the largest lines, a 460-foot condor, in 1982. It seems practice makes perfect for Joe and for the Nazca. If you examine some of the original lines, they don't look so perfect. Some of the Nazca's calculations weren't on target. But as time went on, they learned from their mistakes and perfected their techniques. But the question still remains, if the Nazca did make these lines themselves, why? Some believers think that after the aliens left, the Nazca longed for the aliens to return, so they drew the lines to lure the aliens back to them.
Well, it's an interesting story. You know, some people believe that, and some people believe in the Easter Bunny. And again, as an archaeologist, I say, okay, well, where exactly is the evidence for that?
The Lonely Nazca theory assumes there were aliens for the Nazca to signal to. That's a big assumption, maybe too big.
There's an old rule in science, it's called Occam's razor, and essentially what it's about is it says, look, when you have multiple possible explanations for something, go with the one that requires the fewest other assumptions. That's probably the one to stick with until direct physical evidence that that's wrong and something else is right. Until that comes along, go with the simplest.
But there's plenty of simpler explanations out there. Joe Nichols' explanation brings us back to the gods.
The gravel has been cleared to the bare dirt, and they would work as processional figures, labyrinths, if you will. There's even some unnecessary, sometimes winding about in the figures, perhaps to gather the images, the power from the image.
Many Nazca line drawings have one element in common: lines extending outside the actual design. Almost like an entrance leading into the body of the hummingbird, for example. Nichols' conclusion? The people who built these lines traversed them as part of a sacred devotion.
Whatever else the Nazca Lines were, they were ceremonial walking paths. I feel sure about that.
But there's still the question of the Star Child. Could this 900-year-old skull be proof that hundreds or thousands of years ago, humans mated with aliens? In San Francisco, Jason Eshelman of Trace Genetics is trying to extract the Star Child's DNA. Problem is, he doesn't know if that DNA is human or alien. And who knows what alien DNA would look like anyway. After several tries, Jason finally extracts mitochondrial DNA, the most common type found in a specimen this old. But this kind of DNA can only reveal the Star Child's mother.
And it was a type that is not too unexpected for where it was found in that region of the Southwest.
This time, the Star Child's DNA reveals its mother is a human.
I look for human DNA, and in something that's humanoid shape, you sort of expect to find human DNA.
The father? Lloyd will never know until he can successfully test the Star Child's nuclear DNA.
When its nuclear DNA is examined, it's going to be shown not to be 100% human.
Not everyone agrees it's important to find out who the Star Child's father was.
There's nothing of a Star Child quality that I can see in this skull. It is just an anomaly in human variation that we have seen before.
Bill Rodriguez has seen plenty of skulls in his career as a forensic anthropologist. He's even examined the Star Child back in 1999.
The average layperson looking at the remains of a Star Child certainly would look very strange and highly unusual and maybe even freakish.
The Star Child's face is pretty odd, especially the shallow eye sockets. What kind of human could survive with eyes like that?
Even though they are very shallow, we still see evidence of the areas of the back of the orbits, which allows the optic nerve to provide sight. And the skull, basically in its shaping, has just reacted by having the orbits form that shape.
But there are still lots of strange features to the Star Child, not least of which is the skull's very misshapen head. As Lloyd sees it, the skull's shape itself proves it could not have been fully human.
The answer seems to be that its genes told it to grow this way, and every compensation that needed to be made was made to accommodate all of these very significant changes that are just simply not seen in human beings.
Not so fast. Rodriguez has a cast of a normal skull that isn't too far off the shape of the Star Child.
And many times we'll see in young children parietal bossing. This is where the parietal bones on each side actually protrude out somewhat. This is not abnormal, but again, if you look at it from the back without some of the frontal facial area, it looks very much like that of the profile that we see in the Star Child.
So it comes down to the eye of the beholder. But just because the Star Child may not be the smoking gun to prove that ancient astronauts altered the course of human history, doesn't mean we don't have some link to them. Fossil evidence of the common ancestor between ape and man still eludes us. Could aliens be that common ancestor? More specifically, did aliens mate with us?
Carl Sagan said it best when he said that it's more likely a human could mate with a petunia than with an extraterrestrial, because at least the human and the petunia evolved on the same planet. So any rationale for why this would, it's all sort of falls in the realm of fantasy land.
The theory that aliens colonized Earth thousands of years ago, created us to be their slaves, and changed the course of human history may not go away, at least in the near future. There are so many questions we may never be able to answer about our ancestors, human or alien.
Science is really just one long series of corrected mistakes. I think the Star Child shows that there are mistakes that need to be corrected.
I think E.T. has not come yet. There may be extraterrestrials somewhere in the infinity of the universe, but there's no good evidence that it's ever come here, and it's not likely to happen soon.
Without hard facts, legends and artifacts from thousands of years ago will always be up for interpretation.
It's almost like somewhere inside of us, we know we belong out in the stars. And it's just a matter of how do we get back there.
So I think it's this desire to find this force, this godlike force. And if we can't believe in the supernatural God, well, maybe there are godlike creatures with godlike powers who ultimately are going to save us from ourselves.
We may never know the absolute truth. All we can do is make up our own minds on the issue.
The only way the ancient astronaut theory can be disproven is when the extraterrestrials show up and say, we were never here in the past. Good one, huh?
It's time for you to decide. Could extraterrestrials be an integral part of our culture, even our DNA? Or is an idea like that simply out of this world?